The Carolina Panthers fired head coach Matt Rhule early in his third season with the team. During his time in Carolina, Rhule compiled an 11-27 record and finished his Panthers career with a staggering 1-27 record when opposing teams scored more than 17 points. And for as bad as that sounds, there is a lot to look forward to in the Panthers' future. They have several good players on this roster and an owner in David Tepper who wants to win and wants to bring a championship to the Queen City. Obviously, a change was needed, and with Matt Rhule gone, the question becomes what's next. Carolina is in a much different state as a franchise than most other one-win teams, and I do think them getting blown out by the 49ers at home will prove to be very beneficial in the long run, mainly because it was Matt Rhule's final straw. But there is a lot to dive into in today's video, and without further ado, let's begin. When discussing the Carolina Panthers' future and what's in store for them, we have to take a look at their past and how things got here. And a large reason, though not the only reason to be clear, why Matt Rhule struggled in Carolina was the quarterback play. In his first season with the team, they signed Teddy Bridgewater to a 3-year, $63 million contract. In Teddy's lone season in Carolina, Bridgewater finished the year with a 4-11 record as a starter, and in 15 games threw just 15 touchdowns to 11 interceptions. Year one of the Rhule era didn't exactly go according to plan, and they came to a consensus Teddy was not the answer. That offseason, they made a trade to acquire Sam Darnold from the Jets for what was entirely too much, as they gave up a 6th-round pick and a future 2nd and 4th-round pick. This was a poor trade for two big reasons, and they are the Jets had the number 2 overall pick in 2021, and everyone knew they were going to select a quarterback. It wasn't clear at the beginning of the draft process whether that would be Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, or Justin Fields, but Trevor Lawrence, the number 1 overall pick, and somebody else was going to be the number 2 overall pick. And the second reason why this was a bad trade, at least for what they gave up for Darnold, was it was entirely too much. I didn't mind that the Panthers at the time at least had a better situation than what Darnold had in New York and were going to give him a chance. I had a problem with the Panthers giving up future draft capital for a player who had struggled big time in his first 3 seasons in the league and still gave up a lot more than anyone else was going to offer. Because one big thing to remember here, the Jets had to get rid of Darnold one way or another before the 2021 season started. That 2nd-round pick, by the way, eventually turned into running back Breece Hall. My biggest complaint with this trade is sending all of this draft capital for a quarterback who, before you acquired him, had a career 13-25 record and was coming off of a 2-10 season as a starter. This would be the definition of buying low on a player. And if in the scenario Rhule and his staff truly believe Darnold was their long-term guy, they should have traded less for him, period. Predictably, the Panthers didn't have a good 2021 season and finished the year with a 5-12 record and had the number 6 overall pick in the 2022 NFL Draft. And because of the Darnold trade, where they gave up a 2nd-round pick and eventually trading for corner CJ Henderson, in which they gave up a 3rd-round pick, they had just 1 draft pick in the top 100 of this year's draft. In order for Carolina to get Matt Corral, they traded next year's 3rd-round pick so they could get back into the 3rd round in 2022. And if you were wondering about the Baker Mayfield trade, they traded a conditional 2024 5th-round pick. So heading into next year's draft, the Panthers have just 4 picks at the moment, and they are their 1st, 2nd, 4th, and 5th-round picks, which is not ideal to build a team and to have a great draft. And if you've been online recently, then you've heard a ton of trade rumblings with any of Carolina's star players, whether that be Christian McCaffrey to Buffalo, Brian Burns to Philadelphia, or DJ Moore to Green Bay or Baltimore. There's been a ton of rumors around mainly these 3 guys because they are the most lucrative players Carolina has to offer at the moment, and they need draft capital. Based on his injury history, I do think it would be wise for them to unload Christian McCaffrey or, at minimum, look very heavily into it. That may not be the most popular take, but McCaffrey has played in just 15 of the team's last 38 games. Yes, Christian is a very dynamic player, but remember, they are not obligated to trade him, and because of this, the Panthers will probably be lowballed in the offers they receive from a team like the Bills, who are pushing for their first Super Bowl title. Buffalo makes the most sense for Christian, but that's not the only place he could go. Brian Burns' name has been brought up in trade rumors, and I do not think they should trade him, even as enticing of an offer as that may be. Burns is a very good pass rusher and has 4 sacks in 5 games, and there is a very good chance he gets double-digit sacks for the first time in his career this year. And not only that, but for this trade to really be worth it for the Panthers, they would have to be, in a lot of ways, overly compensated for their next head coach, because at the moment, Burns and a few other defensive players on the roster, like J.C. Horn, like Jeremy Chinn, are attractions to the head coach in the post-Matt Rhule era. I haven't formally said this, but Steve Wilks is the interim head coach for the Panthers, and I do not believe he is the long-term guy, regardless of how the 2022 Panthers season finishes. The best thing that could happen to Carolina this year, aside from Matt Rhule already being fired, is if they finish this season with the worst record in the league. I know how that initially sounds, but there are a few things we know with the Panthers. Baker Mayfield nor Sam Darnold are the long-term answer, period. But CJ Stroud or Bryce Young may be. And if they finish with the worst record in the NFL, I do think CJ would be the number 1 pick at the moment, as in 6 games this year, Stroud already has 24 passing touchdowns and his Buckeyes are undefeated. And we said at the beginning of the video, the Panthers are in a lot better of a situation than other 1-win teams at the moment, and I truly believe that. Other teams would kill for J.C. Horn or Brian Burns, or even though Carolina hasn't gotten the ball to him much this year, DJ Moore, Green Bay. But the Panthers have 93 points in 5 games, which equates to 18.6 per contest. That's the 8th fewest in the NFL. Not only is that the 8th fewest in the NFL, but they have the least yards out of any team in the league through 5 games. And what's important to remember here is no team has had a bye week yet, so it's not like they are one of few teams that have played 5 games and everyone else has played 6. They have less yards than the Justin Fields-led Bears, who have routinely been mocked on social media, less yards than the Davis Mills-led Texans, and everyone else for that matter too. If they hire an offensive-minded head coach who will truly work with a young quarterback and truly develop him, I don't think the sky is the limit for this team in 2023, but I do think they will be contending for a division title as early as next year. In some ways, that's not saying much because I also think Tom Brady will retire this year, which will benefit the rest of the division. But for a team that could have the number 1 overall pick to contending for a division in one offseason is a big win, no matter how you slice it. Carolina is a 1-4 team, but they're not far off from having a winning record. Granted, that would put them at 3-2 through 5 games, but a winning record nonetheless. They lost 19-16 in New York back in Week 2, which propelled the Giants to a 2-0 start and a team who is now 4-1 through 5 games. They played a solid game all around. This is Carolina, that is. -1 position, and you can argue Carolina deserved to win. They held the Giants to 19 points. Daniel Jones had just 176 yards passing and averaged just 5.2 yards per attempt. They sacked him 3 times, and all-purpose back Saquon Barkley averaged just 3.4 yards per carry and only had 3 catches for 16 yards out of the backfield as well. Carolina fumbled the opening kick, which immediately put the Giants in field goal range, and the Panthers ended up losing the turnover battle 2-0. Baker didn't play well, as he finished 14 of 29 for 145 yards and a touchdown, but missed several throws. The Giants are a good team at the moment, and the Panthers are a bad team, and in games like this, where it comes down to a few points, and in a game where the Panthers more or less spotted them 3 points right from the start, it shows in a big way. The defense deserved the win in Week 2, and in Week 1 to the Cleveland Browns, Carolina lost with a final score of 26-24. The run game wasn't working all day, and the biggest thing from Mayfield to whoever they replace him with next year is they can't be as bad as Baker has been at times. Sure, there's going to be mistakes, and even rookie mistakes, but in the first quarter of this game, the Panthers ran 11 plays for a combined -2 yards. I'm not saying being a quarterback or playing in the NFL is easy, because it's not, but for this team to win 7 to 8 games this year, which is possible, or was possible, the offense had to have played better through the first 5 games. There's a reason why this team was a lot of people's dark horse contender at the beginning of the year. They have a lot of key parts to the car, just not the right engine. I fully believe the rest of 2022 will be a long season for the Panthers, meaning I think they are going to lose a lot of games. For the long-term sake of this team, I hope Christian McCaffrey is dealt, and I hope he is the only player dealt out of any of the bigger named players on this team. J.C. Horn is having a hell of a second season and will not be traded. And for next year, when the Panthers have a new head coach and a new quarterback, Ike Ekwonu will be a second-year tackle and have a much-needed first year under his belt. I believe he will be a good player for this franchise in the long run, but there have been some rookie pains for him to deal with, which is to be expected. He played Myles Garrett in his NFL debut, guys. I mean, he was expected to give up a sack in that game, and he did. But for all of the doom and gloom that it's been for the Panthers since the start of the Matt Rhule era, yes, there will be some residual effects that last through the entirety of the 2022 season, but beyond this year, the Panthers have a ton of pieces, and given the state of the NFC South, I expect this team to be competing sooner rather than later. And that's all I have for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel as well as the second channel, which the link is in the description. And until next time, as always, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.